Alright, hey everyone. We're going to get started. It is noon now, or just about noon. There we go, now it's noon. Okay, so as I've been saying previously, we're going to go ahead and start with the training campaign today. Also, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming back for those people who've been here before, and welcome to the new people. So, yeah, this is hopefully going to be one of the last streams before we release. So, what I'd like to do is play through the training campaign and upload this to YouTube in a bunch of different segments for each lesson module so that new people completely new to Combat Mission, will have something on video they can watch instead of having to read a manual. So I'm going to go ahead and warn you guys now for the regulars and the Combat Mission veterans. A lot of this stuff is going to be, pretty basic, simple stuff to you, like how to move units around stuff. So there might be places where you get kind of bored. So I'm just going to warn you now. But for the new people that have never played this game before or haven't played it since Shock Force or something like that, hopefully this will be very useful for them. So, alright, let's go ahead and start with the campaign. Whoops, sorry, I accidentally turned on the music at a loud part there. Okay. And since I know people are going to ask when we're releasing, the answer is the same as always. It is when it's ready, and that is very soon, but it's just not as simple as me flipping on a switch. We have things we got to do first before we can release it. And they're almost done, but still working through it. Okay. So, yes, we're going to play through the training campaign. Let's see, I'm going to actually pretty much follow through the tutorial as we go through it. Okay, so an important note about the training campaign is that unlike most campaigns, most training campaigns in most games, there is no, your controls are never locked. You're never like made to do just one thing. You're free to do whatever you want. The training campaign is really more of a guide. So, and because Combat Mission, has lots of the events don't always play out the same way every time. In fact, they usually don't. It means that things may deviate slightly from what the training campaign thinks will happen. They probably won't, but they might slightly. So just like any real life event, if that happens, you just have to improvise a little bit. So it's just worth noting that you're not going to be locked into anything. You're not going to get a glowy little button, and it's the only thing that you can interact with on the screen. You should just kind of follow the text as a guide when you actually play through the training campaign. Okay, so it's pretty simple. I don't really need to narrate this because you can just watch if you're a brand new player. We go to campaign. We pick training. There are going to be 4 campaigns in the game, one for the Russians, one for the Americans, and one for the Ukrainians, and then a training campaign. You want to pick the one titled Training Campaign. Fight is the one for selecting. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over for the completely new people is for single player, there are 2 different ways to play the game. There is turn-based and real-time. There's also 2-player modes, but we're not going to go into that here. So the one that people are probably most familiar with from playing Combat Mission before is turn-based. We also call this WeGo. It is a simultaneously turn-based mode where you have different phases, and during a command phase, the game is paused, no action is going on, and everyone plots their orders and gives commands to their units and all that stuff, and it reviews the battlefield. And then when both players, or in this case, just the one player, presses the go button, the game plays out for 1 minute with absolutely no interaction on your part. You can pause, you can rewind, but you can't give any orders to units. You just have to sit there and wait for that minute to go by and live with the consequences of your actions. And then you can also play in real time, and that is like every real-time game you've ever played. It just goes, you can also pause it by pressing the space bar, but you can't rewind. The game just plays out, forward. And so you can play any scenario or any campaign in either mode interchangeably. You have to play through the whole scenario, though. Once you pick it, you have to play through the whole scenario in that mode. So there are advantages and disadvantages to this. A lot of it's just personal preference. With turn-based, with the simultaneous WeGo, Mikey says turn-based is the best based. So turn-based has the advantage of you can replay, like let's say there's a really complex combat happening. You can replay it from all the angles and watch everything in explicit detail, so you can really get all the information you need out of what's going on the battlefield. You also have lots of time to plan out your orders and everything. Real time has the disadvantage that you can't if something goes by, if something passes and you don't catch it on your camera, it's gone. You don't see it because you can't rewind. But you can give your orders to units immediately. Like if you back a tank into a street and something starts shooting at it, you can immediately adjust the orders for that tank and tell it to get the heck out of there. Whereas if it's WeGo, you've got a minute where the AI has to fend for itself, and you got to hope that it lives through that turn. So there's advantages and disadvantages. For this tutorial, we're going to assume that you are playing in turn-based. The instructions sort of assume that, but you could play in real time if you wanted to. Okay, then there are skill levels. These aren't quite the same as difficulty levels. There are no difficulty levels in the game, there are skill levels. We're not going to worry about scenario author test. That's for people who actually make content for the game. So skill levels are going to primarily affect Fog of War and fire support. So it's going to affect how long it takes artillery and air support to arrive on the battlefield. The lower the skill level, like basic training is the lowest and iron is the highest. The lower the skill level, the faster it arrives, and the higher the skill level, the longer it takes to arrive. With Fog of War, which tells you what information you have on enemy units that are available, the higher the skill level, the less information you're going to have on enemy units. Whereas if you're like basic training, basically the second you spot an enemy unit, you know everything about it. Whereas if you're on Iron, you don't even know all that much about your own forces unless you have that unit selected. So for this campaign, we are assuming that you're playing on Veteran. All of the text in the campaign and the campaign setup assumes that. You can, of course, pick whatever you want, but it may deviate slightly. Okay, so this is what we are assuming for the campaign. If you follow through the campaign text, it is assuming turn-based and veteran. Alright, so when you hit OK and you go to the campaign briefing screen, you're going to see this once at the beginning of the campaign, and it's basically a basic briefing overview of the whole campaign. We'll go into the briefing format a little bit more thoroughly in the next briefing screen. You don't need to read this because I'm telling you it right now. So the storyline for this campaign, it's a very basic storyline, is a NATO unit is on a joint training exercise in western Ukraine with some Ukrainian forces. That's basically that's it for the briefing for the campaign. There's going to be 4 missions in the campaign: a basic gunnery range, an advanced gunnery range, fire support training, and then a practical live fire exercise. And we're going to go through all of those soon. It's important to note with the skill levels, the difficulty, I'm going to go ahead and turn the sound on, the difficulty of enemy units does not change with skill levels. If you're fighting a T-72 tank, its capabilities are not going to be changed regardless of the skill level. It's going to be exactly the same. The skill level primarily affects some specific systems in the game, such as the artillery support in the Fog of War. It does not make the enemy AI harder or easier. Okay, so Mission 1, Basic Gunnery Range. We're going to use this mission to demonstrate some really basic commands in the game. Okay, so briefing. Every mission you have a briefing. You get 3 maps. You have Strategic Map, which just kind of gives you an overview of where you are generally in the country. You get a Operational Map, which gives you a little bit more detail, and in the stock missions that you'll get with the game, it will also give you some basic information on mission objectives here. The name of the mission objective, what type of objective it is, how many points it's worth. Specifics on objectives we'll get to later in the campaign as we encounter them. And then you get a tactical map, which actually gives you an overhead view of the battlefield with some important information highlighted, such as your friendly units and some enemy units on the map. We don't see any enemy units on the map because there are no enemy units on this map, there's just targets. So in this case, blue units are us, those are NATO units. There will always be a key. We use NATO symbols in the game, or at least on the maps, but there's always a key. We'll usually keep it somewhere over here on the map. This denotes the type of unit it is, the the cross over the rectangle is infantry, and then we denote the sizes here. It's very broad brushes though. The whole point of this map is to just give you a quick overview of the battlefield. It's not going to give you very, very detailed information. And then white text is always objectives. Those kind of give you a pointer on where to look for the objectives when we get into the game. And then it will also give you a listing of support available and any reinforcements you have that will be arriving. Alright, you're always going to want to read the briefing thoroughly for any missions, because they're going to give you information that's going to help you out a lot. And they'll also usually give you some tips. Either specific information that you really need to know, or just some general tips to help you out with beating the mission. In this case, we don't really need to go through the briefing because I'm going to go through the whole mission in detail. Alright, so when you hit OK, you get your view of the battlefield. If you ever need to see the briefing again, go down here to Menus, and then you click on Menus, and there's a few options here. Click on Briefing, and bam, you're back at the briefing. So you can always review it whenever you need to. Alright, first thing we're going to go over is the user interface. So if we select a unit, we'll go over what a unit is in just a moment. So select a unit by left-clicking on its floating icon above it, the little circle here. You'll notice down here we get a bunch of information populated with it. Okay, so over here where I'm moving the mouse, I'm going to be highlighting a bunch of stuff here with my mouse, so just follow where the mouse is going. Over here we're going to have the unit info panel, and this is where you're going to find basic information about the selected unit. Just the unit you've selected, not the rest of them. So, for example, in this part of the interface here, you're going to get information on the unit's name, its experience. Down here you get a listing of ammunition levels. You get types of C2 communications, we're going to go over that later. The rank of the unit, which is mostly just for aesthetics. And also its connections to higher headquarters. Once again, that'll be for another mission, we'll go over that in detail. So this is just basic unit information. You go over to the right, and you get the special equipment panel. This tells you what sort of special unique equipment the unit has. This is all stuff we'll go over in detail as we kind of just go through the campaign. And then we get the support panel. We'll also go through that later. This is how you call artillery and fire support by accessing these buttons here. They'll bring up a new panel. We move over another one to the right, and we get the... Whoops, hold on a second. I just messed something up on my follow-along screen here. Okay, I'm good. So we got the team info panel over here. And this gives you specific information on the soldiers that are within the team or the squad. So if you mouse over it, in a lot of things in the interface, it'll give you a little tooltip telling you some more about it. So it basically tells you the weapon the soldier is carrying. It also tells you their specialty if they have one, such as gunner, this is for a machine gunner, anti-tank is for guys that are specialized for using anti-tank weapons. Leader is it's pretty self-explanatory, he's the leader of the squad or the team. And it also gives you some information on his current state of health. So gray means they're healthy, there's nothing wrong with them. If it turns a yellow color, they've been wounded. And if it turns yellow and then a red casualty text over it, it means he's a casualty and he's no longer in the fight. And then we move over another panel and we get the command panel. And we're going to go over this. We're going to go over all of these commands throughout the campaign. The commands are grouped into 4 categories, 4 command panels here. There is M for the movement commands, C for the combat commands, S for the special commands, and A for the admin commands. And like I said, we'll go through all of these in detail as we go through the campaign. And then the last thing we got here is just basic turn control commands. The white number here tells you how much time is left in the scenario. This will count down. When it hits 0, the scenario will end unless it goes into overtime. So we have 30 minutes to play this scenario. For time controls, we'll actually demonstrate these when we play out a turn, but this basically lets you rewind, fast forward, all that stuff. And the red button is what makes you go from one phase to the next, either from the command phase to the replay phase, or the replay phase to the command phase. Okay, next thing. So a big thing in this game is this game has a very unique camera compared to most games. Most games have a fixed perspective camera where it looks sort of like this, and all you can, whoops, wrong button. And all you can do is sort of move it around like this, right? The camera's pretty much stuck. If you're lucky, you can maybe go like this or rotate it around like that, but it's pretty much stuck at one perspective. So this game has a really flexible camera that you can move all around. Those of you who have used any 3D editing programs will actually be pretty familiar with this camera. So, standard camera controls are you hold down and drag the left mouse button if you want to pan the camera around the map, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm just holding down the left mouse button. We pan the camera around the battlefield. If you want to change which way the camera is facing, if you want to pivot it, you hold down the right mouse button, and you can change it, make it look in any direction you want. It stays still on the battlefield, it just pivots, it just changes where it's facing. You can also use, if you want to use the keyboard, the mouse is better to use as your general movement, but if you want to fine-tune things, you can move it with the keyboard. So WASD, like any first-person shooter you've played, will move the mouse, or will move the camera around the battlefield, pretty much like how you would expect it would. And then Q and E will change its facing. If you use R and F, you can do this. It will basically bring the camera up and down, and the camera will try and point at the same spot on the map, as you can see. It's sort of looking right here. By the way, guys, I'm going to apologize now. I'm going to apologize now to the people in chat. Unless you're asking a specific question about the training campaign or something related to the training campaign, I'm probably not going to respond to you. It's not that I'm ignoring you, it's just that I'm really busy talking and following through the tutorial text, so it's kind of hard to have a conversation and do that at once. We can maybe discuss that a little bit after we're done going through this campaign. Okay, for altitude, we've already shown you R and F. You can also, my favorite way to do it, you can change the altitude really simply, raise and lower the camera by just scrolling with the mouse wheel. Just scroll up and down the mouse wheel and you'll move it up and down. This is a good way to do it without changing the camera's pitch. Okay, so there are some presets. Numbers 1 through 9 on your keyboard will set it to presets. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can use these as just quick shortcuts to where you want the camera to be. So that was 3. I just went from 9 to 3. And if you're on a large battlefield, as you can see, this is a pretty long battlefield. Let's say I want to go all the way over to artillery range. If I just pan over there like normal, this would take forever, right? So hold down Control and just left-click on the ground. Your camera will instantly jump to that point. You can jump anywhere on the battlefield like that. Very easy, fast way to get around a big battlefield. If you want to flip the camera around 180 degrees instantly, the hotkey for that is V. Also an extremely useful key that you'll probably use a lot. Just flipping the camera 180 degrees. And let's see, there's also Z and X will zoom the camera in and out. If you are too lazy to move the camera around, you can just zoom in to look. And the camera zoom goes up to 20 times. Don't worry, we're going to get to shooting stuff pretty soon here. Gotta get through the basics first. Okay, there is another way to move the camera. You should use this sparingly, though, because it is not as precise as the other control methods. You can also move the cursor to the edge of the camera, or to the edge of the screen, and it will move the camera around. So, there is that. Okay, now let's go over some basic unit stuff. We're going to start moving some things around.